I have a few different ideas about the way we approach safety, and I'm hoping to explain a little bit about that. I'm hoping to explain a little bit about risk management, which is a very simple process. And then I'll talk about the Australian Entertainment Safety Resource Guide, which is a project I started last year. The first thing I want to talk about is what safety is not. Safety is not about the law. Safety is not about rules. It's not about legislation. It's not about paperwork. It's not about high-vis vests. Those are all side effects. They come with safety. They're not what safety is about. What safety is about is being mindful of the work you do. Mindful about how you do the work and how your work impacts on others. Be considerate of other people in the same workspace. Be proactive. Understand what you need to do your job safely and properly. Think about it, plan it ahead, know what you're going to see. Be informed. Understand what you need. Know what everybody else who's working for you needs. Know what other people in the room may need or may not need. Safety is about going home. Where I'm really coming from is incorporating safety as a culture into the everyday job. For as long as we keep safety as an add-on, it remains optional. That's the bit we have to remove. Safety needs to be embedded in the work we're doing. Pretty much the same way as you would do in lighting. When you put a lighting system up, you know that voltage times amperage gives you your wattage. You may not like that, but that's a fact you have to deal with. In rigging, you need to do your calculations. You need to calculate how much weight you're going to put on that point. And yes, you may be able to hang 2 ton on a 1 ton shackle. It may just hang there, it may not hang there. But you need to do the calculations. Audio, you need to make sure that you have the right amount of PA for the type of event, the type of music, and the type of room. Logistics. If somebody tells you that they're going to drive from Johannesburg to Cape Town in 10 hours in a 10-ton truck, you know it's not going to happen. It's the simple laws of physics that you cannot travel that fast without breaking the road rules. Safety is pretty much the same, except we use different calculations to work out what we are going to do. It's called risk assessment. A lot of people may want you to believe that risk assessment and risk management is a very complicated process. It's not, and I'm hoping to show you how simple it really is. This is basically a flow chart. So we're just going to look at the center bit, which is the risk assessment side of things. The first thing we do in a risk assessment is identifying the risks in your workplace. So that could be walking around the room you need to put a show in, or walk around your warehouse, or walk around the loading dock, the dressing room, everything that will be part of your event. See if there is anything that you think may cause a risk at some point in time. Review production plans. I find that a lot of your risk assessment can be done just looking at the production plan. Look at the schedule, see how that works. Because it tells you a lot about the people who are working for you when you look at the schedule. Have they allowed reasonable time to do things? Have they looked at how things overlap? A classic example I find is You have the audio company for a large banquet. There'll be a band in the evening. They'll plan their systems check at about 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Systems check make an awful lot of noise. So the audio company will have earplugs or muffs or some way to protect the hearing of their staff. At 3 p.m. is also when the caterer starts setting the tables. What are the chances of the caterer actually having earplugs for their staff because they don't understand what a system check is? That is something you need to identify and address. Look at set construction, look at engineering, all those things, review and make sure that it makes sense. And finally, understand the production requirements. You need to understand what it is, what will be asked from you, what you're going to need to deliver that service. Do you have all the right tools? Do you have the whole process? The purpose of the process is to identify everything you can fix before you get to the venue. Because that'll give you the time to fix the things nobody had thought about at the venue. Because there's always that little surprise at the end. The more you can fix before you get there, the more time you have to deal with the unplanned. Now we have a whole list of things that we need to have a look at. That can be a little bit overwhelming. And that's where we need to start looking at, okay, how are we going to deal with this? So we need to prioritize. Risk assessment is a very simple process where you look at something and you say, well, how likely is it going to happen? How badly is it going to hurt me if it does happen? Simplest way to look at it is think about it as crossing the road. You're standing on the road, you want to get to the other side, you look, and there is a cyclist coming towards you. So you then calculate, okay, well, can I make it across the road before the cyclist gets here? And if I miscalculated that, how badly is it going to hurt me if he hits me? Cyclist, yeah, could be either one of us is worse off, but now you're standing at the same spot. But instead of a cyclist, it's a 10-ton truck. So you do the same calculation. Can I get across the road? Yes. If I don't make it across the road, it's going to hurt very badly. So that makes you change your plan. That's what we talk about in likelihood. You analyze how likely it is that something is going to go bad, or something you would not like to happen. These are the 5 basic structures. From very rare, which means no, we are here. Is it likely there'll be an earthquake? Not really. Is it likely that maybe when we plan half the event outside it's going to rain? Yes, it is much more likely. So that's how you sort of try to find where within the whole scheme of things that risk sits. The next thing is then looking at the consequences. As I said, the difference between being hit by a cyclist or by a 10-ton truck. When you look through that, the insignificant, to put it in perspective, that's what I would call a band-aid. Somebody has a cut in their finger or something like that. That's insignificant. Minor gets a little bit more serious, may need some first aid assistance, but still, it's not going to have a major impact on your bumping or your loading. Bumping is the Australian expression for loading. It then gets a little bit more serious because we now start looking at major, which means that somebody may have been seriously injured. Where that gets different is because you now need to start looking at why did it happen? Is it possible that it happens again? So that's where it starts impacting on your time, because you now need to investigate. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? Is it likely to repeat, or can we go on? The next step gets even more serious. This is where we start looking at maybe something collapsed that may impact on whether we can go ahead. And finally, the extreme is where people actually have died or the structure has collapsed. We've seen a fair few stage roofs collapse around the world recently, mostly in North America. So that would be a definite extreme. So if the risk you're looking at has that consequence, then you need to take these things very seriously. So now we have a list with risks. We have determined the likelihood of that risk occurring, and we have the consequence if it would occur. And then we compare that with the matrix. And then it becomes a very simple calculation. Consequence times likelihood. Anything that's in the green area are the things you will put aside. So, well, yes, I've identified the risk, I'm aware of it. For the time being, it's not really that important. Let's put it aside. The yellow ones are the ones where you go, a bit more important, but not critical to my operation. So I'll keep an eye on them, but may not move instantly. It's when you get into the orange where you still really need to start looking at taking decisions. Something needs to happen. And if it's in the red zone, it's just a no-go. That's where you go, sorry guys, we cannot do it this way. It's the area I hate, because I always believe you can find a way to do things properly. But sometimes you may not have the budget or the time to do it. But if the thing you are trying to do initially throws up an extreme, hit the microphone. So those are the ones you need to look at first. Because now we're going to look at what are we going to do with these things, treat the risks. This is where we use a hierarchy of control. And you start at the top and you try to keep it as high as possible. So the first step is elimination. If there is something in your production that is causing an unacceptable risk, the best thing to do is try to eliminate it altogether. Do we actually need it? Is there a better way of doing this? For instance, you have some lights which are on a bar which is 7 meters in the air, and somebody decides to do that with a ladder. You go, well, is that a really good idea? Would it not be better to have a scissor lift? So you eliminate the ladder, replace it with a scissor lift. And that brings me to substitution. Is there a better way of doing this? Isolation and engineering are things where you could say, well, I'm going to put a fence around this area because it poses a risk. Or I can have a guard around it so that people can't touch a moving thing. That's engineering. That is about as far as you want to go, because beyond that, you're now entering a very grey area, which is administrative measures. Administrative means that you may have a procedure. The problem with having a procedure is that you cannot be sure everybody is aware of it. So you can say, well, when you're standing here, don't step off the side of the stage unless somebody tells me not to step off the side of the stage. I don't know this. You cannot assume that everybody in your workplace is aware of those administrative controls unless you have a system in place that addresses them. You can say, well, put up a sign. Signs are very, very dangerous. Because by signs, you assume two things. One, that a person actually sees the sign. And B, that they understand what the sign means. Because it can be a pictogram, which for many of us makes perfect sense. For others may not. It can be written in a language that the person doesn't speak. The person may not be able to read. You know, those are things science will not fix. So be very, very careful. The last one is PPE, personal protective equipment. PPE means that you have lost the battle. Because PPE only makes it hurt a little bit less. It does not make the problem go away, it does not make the risk go away. And again, it assumes that people are wearing their PPE. So always keep that as a very, very last resort. And then we go to the final and most important section, which is communicate and consult. There is no point going through all this work, identifying the risk, categorizing them, finding treatments, and then put that whole report in your top drawer and go away. You need to communicate it to the people who are in the workplace, the people who are doing the work. And you need to consult them about it. Consultation is the core of a safety management plan. Because you may come up with what you think is the best solution to this problem. Your workers may have much better ideas. Consult with everybody in your workplace as much as reasonably possible, because they will find the answers that you need. What consultation also does is that it gives a bit of ownership to everybody who is working in that place. And it makes people understand why certain things are done in a certain way. There's nothing worse than working on a job and somebody just walks in and says, oh yeah, I know you've been doing that like that for 10 years. Yeah, we're doing it different now. There may be a reason you want it to be done differently, but you need to explain that. Once you've explained it, people will start interpreting, using it, and we are now looking at a safer workplace. A lot of this theory and a lot of these risks and a lot of these things that may be implementing your workplace and your events, quite often the information is hard to find. For me in Australia, we have the Work Health and Safety Act, then we have the Work Health and Safety Regulation, which is the same for most of the country now. There's still 2 states that use an older system, but the rest of the country now works at least under the same system. On top of that, we then have the codes of practice, which take a certain section of the Act or the regulation and gives it a bit more detail. Then we have sets of Australian standards, which give you more detail about how things are to be done or to be tested. For instance, if you talk about fire retardancy of drapes, there is an Australian standard for that. It says for that application, it needs to have these criteria when it's tested. And then you have a whole bunch of overseas information, of manufacturers' information, like load charts for trussing, things like that. All of that needs to be incorporated. That can be very daunting to find all of the information. And that's where last year, after trying for many, many years to get something like that happening, I started a crowdfunding campaign, which is raising money by having a lot of people contribute a little bit, rather than going to a person, okay, I need this much money. Everybody gave, you know, $100, $200 to contribute to writing this. There have been different approaches to this. Quite often it was always a group of people who were going to write it together. Most of those initiatives worked for about 2 or 3 months before everybody got really, oh no, I'm really busy. And quite frankly, if you work in this industry, do you really want to spend the 1 day a month you have off with more people in black t-shirts in a hotel room? Possibly. So I figured what I would do is I raise the money, and I'm stupid enough to actually say, okay, I'm going to write it. So these are some of the people that supported me in that process and helped me raise the money. I will follow very closely the UK Purple Guide, because that was my starting point. The UK Purple Guide was also used as the basis for the event safety guide in the USA. But I want to put a bit of a change to it, because I found both of them much too descriptive. I believe that it should be much more of an educational tool. So rather than telling you, okay, you build a stage, you do it like this, you do it like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you, well, you want to build a stage, you should be aware of this section of the Work Health and Safety Act. You should be aware of this Australian standard. You should be aware of this code of practice. And then interpret that and apply that to your situation. Because every time you build a stage, the environment around it will be different. It will be used in a different way. It will be used in indoors, outdoors. You cannot say this is the way to build a stage. You need to apply it to a specific situation. And that's what I'm planning to do with the guide. That's the website if you want to have a look. There isn't much on there yet, because it's still early days. I hope to have most of it done by July. And I've been warning everyone is that yes, I will write the guide. And no, it won't be right. There will be mistakes, and that's the whole purpose. That's what I mean about consultation. I'll put it out there, I'll set the basic structure up, and then I need your feedback to tell me where I have got it wrong. And by that way, we now have the whole industry involved in actually building guidelines and information that helps us becoming a safer industry. So that's all I just explained. This is a rough structure. This is the structure I'm working off at the moment. What I've done is I've split it into rough areas. One side is the more general, so that's what your suppliers, your companies will provide. The other side is much more site and venue specific. It will go into crowd management, site planning, all those things, and be a bit more direct in those areas.